Why is that you find YouTube to be so valuable?
Every day in the United States, there's 1 billion watch hours on YouTube. 35 minutes or so is spent by an average YouTube user every day. If you see somebody speak directly into the screen and answer the question that you yourself have at that moment, that's extraordinarily powerful.
It's a sea of data, right, that we're dealing with. How do you find managing that in a way that allows you to focus on those key data points?
This is absolutely the best performance marketing use case for AI.
Today on the pod, we're going to be talking to Bill DeCourcy, Chief Lead Generation Officer at Amerilife. We'll be talking to Bill about performance marketing, using different channels like YouTube to make sure we're reaching the right people at the right time. We're going to be talking to him about AI and leveraging AI as marketers to do more with less, to really uncover those key insights and use them to make the best possible decisions. And then we're going to be talking to him about martech and how martech is a critical element to really empower marketers to be able to do more and drive those kind of conversions that we're also interested in. We're excited to talk to Bill today, and we're looking forward to the interview. Bill, thank you so much for taking some time to join us today. Really appreciate it and super excited to be able to talk to you about the digital customer experience. Your professional experience around the customer experience has been great. You've worked in gaming, you've worked in travel, now working with wealth management, working with insurance. So you have this great perspective of that experience and how that experience is really affecting the marketplace in things like operating costs, rising advertising costs, just in general, that drive to the marketer to always do more with less, and how focusing on that post-click experience, what happens after someone interacts with the ad, really helps to mitigate some of those issues and really drive things forward and drive performance. So having said all that, given all these different experiences you have, these different industries, what are those key elements? What are those key threads that you really see that kind of run through that are critically important when it comes to customer experience?
You bet. And thank you, Shamir. It's a pleasure to join you for this podcast. To me, it's about having a seamless omni-channel experience across all of your touch points. That consistency is critically important, whether a customer is interacting with you via your website, via your mobile app, via social media, or a phone call. All of that absolutely needs to feel unified. And the natural question is, of course, how do we achieve this? And what it requires is you have to give a lot of thought and energy to integrating your channels and your data. So what do I mean by that? When I was working on a project recently at Amerilife, we built a martech stack from the ground up. And the most important component of that, so that we could deliver the later products that would have an integrated, consistent experience for our customers, was making sure that our CRM, our analytics dashboards, our lead management tools, and all of our automation platforms were part of one seamless engine. So no matter how somebody enters our marketing funnel, we had a single view of them, and we could deliver that cohesive experience across channels. Here's my biggest fear. I don't want a customer to start researching a product or service on the phone and then get a hold of somebody at the company and have the context not carry over. That, to me, is something that I personally don't find encourages me to want to engage with that person further. But when somebody does a great job of that, when they're backing up on the phone what I've seen about them in other experiences, that's a great experience. That's one that gets me to open my arms a little bit, uncross my arms, and say, I'm willing to talk to you about what you have to offer. So that consistent experience across all of your digital channels, all of your offline channels, is what I think is really critical.
That's so important. And there's so much there that makes up that experience, right? That alignment between marketing, between product, between IT, in order to deliver that experience is what ends up being a challenge for a lot of marketers. So maybe let's kind of walk through that, and let's maybe see how we can help people to kind of dissect this into pieces, right? So if we start at the very top of the funnel, you're driving traffic, right? You're trying to get traffic into your funnel. You're trying to get them to your experience. And I know you've talked a lot about this, about performance marketing and different marketing channels. One of the ones I know you're a big fan of is YouTube advertising, the importance of video and where those eyeballs are at today. why is that you find YouTube to be so valuable? And what are the other channels you find to be valuable when it comes to getting the right audience and driving them into funnels?
You're right. I am a big fan of the different advertising options that are available on YouTube. And it's a very simple reason why I think YouTube has become so powerful. It's literally where the eyeballs are. I read a statistic recently that said something like 35 minutes or so is spent by an average YouTube user every day. I'm probably guilty of spending a little bit more time than that on YouTube. And every day in the United States, there's 1 billion watch hours on YouTube. If you were to ask somebody, what do you think the most important or most useful search engine is on the web? Most people would say Google. I would argue that it's actually YouTube. When I need to do a project around my house, or when I need to figure out why my computer is acting up, or my dog is coughing and I want to understand what it is, the first thing that I do is I go to YouTube and I look up, I do the inquiry there, and I can see exactly how to accomplish things. I can see somebody else with expertise doing it. And I trust that expertise because I'm seeing them in real time accomplish something. And then I look to emulate that, or in the case of a product or service, engage with that person to perform that product or services. Now, whether or not you're in consumer packaged goods, or whether or not you're like me, you're in financial and insurance services, seeing somebody do something and speak with authority is extremely important. You can read an article and you can get a portion of that, but if you see somebody do that, if you see somebody interact with customers, if you see somebody speak directly into the screen and answer the question that you yourself have at that moment, that's extraordinarily powerful. And that's why I'm a huge fan of what YouTube brings to the table.
That's a great explanation, and a great perspective, right, in terms of how marketers should be looking at things. And we often kind of force those kind of square pegs into round holes, right? As opposed to kind of saying, hey, let's look at things from the consumer perspective. Where are they? Where are they finding value in the marketplace? And then how can I kind of piggyback on that, right? And leverage the value they're finding to say, this is a channel that makes sense for me, for my product, for my service, and what I'm trying to do. How do you find the challenges of kind of measuring the effectiveness of these various marketing channels and making sure that you're kind of keeping an eye on things? It's a sea of data, right, that we're dealing with, that we get from these different ad platforms, and how they're driving, how they're converting. How do you find kind of managing that in a way that allows you to focus on those key data points and make sure you're making the kind of iterations and tweaks that are so important?
This is absolutely the best performance marketing use case for AI, doing exactly what you talked about. Let's look at digital advertising writ large. Programmatic ad platforms, they all now have some kind of AI algorithm to automatically bid on ad placements and to target specific audiences in real time, which optimizes your budget, which goes back to the point you made at the beginning, which is every performance marketer is being asked these days to do more with less. Now, as a human being with a team, am I capable of going and doing this? I am. But am I capable doing it to do it at scale in real time when I might be in 30 or 40 channels simultaneously? That's not likely. But if I can set the business rules and let the AI learn what a good conversion is to me, that's going to guarantee that my ads get in front of the right people at the right time far more efficiently than if I'm doing it manually. And I'll say that AI, when brought beyond that use case and used actually then to manage the performance and monitor the performance of the leads that are being generated from these platforms, that's where you really get into the realm of having a marketing superpower. Think about a scenario where you're doing the intelligence at the top of the funnel to make sure that you're targeting and budgeting appropriately. And then once those leads come into the system, using a lead management system to score those leads based on historical data and also on the real-time results in a continuous feedback loop. So all of that then brings in a situation where you can be very agile in terms of where your ad spend is. If you've had historical success on YouTube, I can guarantee you that that's not going to last forever. There will be something that will supplant that. And the performance marketers that are able to see that by experimenting in those channels and having tools like AI lead management and evaluation will be able to see the emerging value of those channels and start to shift their budget, start to be ahead of the curve, and start to really deliver important results for their businesses.
I love that you mentioned that because that's such a great use case, right, for AI. Marketers get so enamored by kind of the shiny toy, so to speak, right? And it's just like, oh, AI, we need to be doing that. Well, what does that mean, right? That's so broad so as to be meaningless. But here's a real powerful use case, right, where AI can now shift through the sea of data, as you mentioned, surface these key insights, and here comes the public service announcement, right? Here's where we give the warning. Hey, where are your kids? It's 10 o'clock. Making sure that it's servicing that data, but not making the ultimate decision that you as the human are still evaluating and saying, okay, what's most important to me in my business, right? How do I make sure that I'm making the right decision for my business? Because AI can't do that. I need to do that. Maybe I'm okay with a higher cost per acquisition because I'm really trying to drive market share. And I need to spend that additional money that maybe under normal conditions isn't so black and white, where AI is going to be more black and white about it. I recognize that this isn't just a computer. This isn't war games. This isn't a computer making decisions that are, going to have global implications. This is me as a human, keeping hold of the wheel and saying what makes sense for what we're trying to do as an organization and where we're trying to go. Are you finding that you're trying to maintain that balance as you use AI?
I absolutely am. And I'm glad you brought up the public service announcements. And I think we're, like, as you said, we're both children of the 80s here. You mentioned war games. I think about things like Terminator. AI was always represented as this emerging evil, apocalyptic type of force in our lives. And now it's here. And dare I say it's helpful. So I've had to shift my perceptions a little bit in terms of how I look at AI. And I don't personally look at is something that's going to threaten or replace the functions that we're doing. I'm looking out my window right now. My across the street neighbor is moving. AI, to me, if I own a moving company, it's a truck that holds 4 times as much stuff, goes twice as fast, and only uses 1/4 the amount of gas. It's a force multiplier. It allows me to do my job more efficiently and at a greater scale than if I didn't have these tools. Now, if I own a moving company, I'm still going to need people to bring stuff in and out of people's houses. I'm still going to need someone to drive that truck. And I'm sure as heck going to need somebody to interact with the homeowner in order to make sure their concerns are taken into account. So the human side of the business, while not remaining static, is remaining very secure. But the things that we want to do at a greater scale with greater efficiency are absolutely enabled by AI. And I consider it to be a friend to everything that we are doing in this business.
That's a great analogy. It's a great way for marketers to think about AI and how we can use it. But that's a good transition, right? Let's talk more about that human aspect. So again, you've come through the various marketing channels. You've had these different points of interaction depending on where you are on the journey. You've maybe touched on Meta. You've hit something on YouTube. Eventually, you come through and you're trying to make a decision after that click as you begin to absorb information, as you begin to maybe think about talking to an agent or making a purchase, maybe chatting with someone online, wherever the case is. One of the things that I love that you talk about often is, as those interactions happen, are you being helpful, right? Are you finding a way to be helpful in the digital customer experience? I'd love for you to talk more about that because that sounds very simple, but it's not. It's easy to say, oh yeah, the information, the content we're offering, of course, it's of help, but it's not that simple. I'd love to hear more about what you have to say about that.
This is a key element of my approach to marketing. It's very simple. Marketing works best when you deliver value before asking for anything at all in return. I firmly believe in this, a value-first approach. You provide helpful, educational content to your audience, and my experience has been that the conversions will just follow naturally. It's like going on a date. If you come on too strong, pushing for something to happen immediately, you risk losing trust. right? Instead, you want to foster that trust. You want to position yourself as a brand, as someone who's a helpful advisor or a problem solver for the customer. That's why I talk about YouTube so much. You can show yourself at scale as a problem solver for the customer. So what does that mean? It means that you have to invest in content marketing. I mean, all of us can do email marketing. We can bombard prospects with buy now messages. We might have a free retirement planning guide or a webinar and investment tips. What's going to convert better? A buy now message or somebody saying, "Let me help you. Come to me with your questions and I will answer them. No purchase necessary." It builds goodwill. And by the time you're ready to introduce a product or some other service offer, the customers are going to feel pressure. They're going to feel help. But I will tell you, you have to take a long-term view of things in order to do that. And I think as performance marketers, that's one of the things that we struggle to communicate to the people that are holding us accountable to our KPIs, that we are trying to play the long game. And let's face it, sales in a lot of cases doesn't play the long game. They want sales now. So there's a little bit of a yin and yang and a push and a pull there, but it's healthy.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think about, okay, if I'm a marketer and I'm trying to maybe think about this differently than I have in the past, as you kind of mentioned there, like how do I begin to kind of take that experience and say, okay, how do I make it truly helpful? Right. So I think, okay, step number one, let's remove the friction in the experience, right? How do I make it as easy as possible for someone to do what I want to do? One of the things I know I personally hate is I hate running into the grocery store to get something, and I know exactly what I want, right? I just need to grab some milk, whatever the case is. And then I go to check out, and all the checkout lines are long because they haven't properly staffed, because it's, maybe it's a little bit in the evening and people are coming home from work and so forth. All the self-checkouts are broken, and it's just like, I don't have time for this, right? Now, I have the thing I want in hand, but I'm more likely just to put it back on the shelf and put it back and leave because it's like, I don't have time for this. I'm gonna do this another time. And it might be at another store that's more convenient to me on that particular day. And now I've lost the sale because you've created this friction. And it's something relatively simple to address. But again, we get so enamored with the flashiness of it all, right? That we're not simply saying, how do we make this experience as frictionless as possible? How have you found the importance of helping your teams understand, hey, we need to make this easy for people?
I absolutely understand what you're saying. And I think that what we are talking about here are some post-click mistakes that companies often make. As performance marketers, we talk a lot about conversions. But the fact of the matter is that term is used way too early in the conversion funnel. A conversion means you've generated, in some cases, a lead. We have to focus on the real work that comes beyond that initial click. Here's the number one thing. It's absolutely universal in every business I've worked on. Slow or no follow-up. When a consumer raises their hand, like submitting a form, maybe they're signing up for a trial, maybe they want a consultation. One big mistake is one of the simplest mistakes that you could make, not following up quickly. You have a short attention span. I have a short attention span. We're being, programmed through all of the information that we receive on a moment-to-moment basis to be able to not necessarily multitask, but quickly shift our focus between different things. And if I reach out to somebody and I don't hear back for a couple of days, my interest is going to fizzle. It'll probably be entirely gone. I probably won't even remember actually filling out the form. I'll tell you a story, and I hadn't planned on sharing this, but I'm going to go ahead and do this because I think that's very germane. So I live in Florida, and we get a lot of sunshine, and I went to my wife a couple of nights ago, and I said, I don't understand why we're not investing more in solar power. I mean, for goodness sakes, you drive a Tesla. There's got to be some way for us to become a little bit more energy efficient around here. Let's try to figure something out. So I did what everyone does. I went online, I watched some videos, I got to a contact form, and I entered my information at one company. This is like 9:30 at night. And, I thought, okay, and kind of out of sight, out of mind, got a return email back. We'll be reaching out to you in the morning. Second thing, same situation. And then I decided, this company looks good. They look local. And I put in my information in a third form. I will tell you, while the circle was still spinning on the screen, somebody from the company reached out to me. And it wasn't a call center. It was a local representative. Hi, my name is Jonathan. Is this Bill? Yeah, hi, this is Bill. Looking for solar. I know it's late, but if you have time, I wanted to go over your appointment schedule to see if I could give you some additional information in person. I booked an appointment with them, and we bought solar panels. Why? Because he was the person who reached out and said, I want to help you with this decision. And he did so in the moment when I was ready to actually buy and excited about it. So just an anecdote from my personal life where that speed to lead really made a difference in, what's a pretty important decision.
I love it. That's an awesome example because that just illustrates, right, what we talked about. It wasn't that necessarily, he might have been, but it wasn't even his sales skills at this point, right? It wasn't that the experience on the website was so persuasive. It wasn't some sale or promotion. It was just the fact that they made this very easy. I filled out the information. I got a contact. I was able to schedule the appointment, right? The steps were very easy to do what you'd already shown that you're interested in doing. And I love why that's such a powerful example. I love the fact that that really focuses on, as you mentioned, just being helpful. Just help me. Just help me to move through this process and do what I'm trying to do. And it's funny because one of the reasons that's such a great example is because it illustrates a point you made right at the beginning of our conversation, and that's the importance of martech, right? So, what kind of stack did that company have that allowed that to move so seamlessly, not just from the website to maybe a call center, but it sounds like from the website to a local rep to be able to reach out to you and make that connection. So, as you've worked with these different organizations, different companies, including your own, how have you seen the importance of the planning and instrumentation of that martech stack in being able to deliver these helpful post-click experiences?
Absolutely. And just one other thing on the solar experience, which I'm realizing now in real time. The other thing that was important about that local rep reaching out to me at whatever it was past 9 o'clock at night was there was a certain element of future reciprocity that came into my mind
Yeah.
almost subconsciously, which is if this person is willing to reach out to me immediately when I have a question and it's after 9, I have his number. And if I have a problem down the road, you better darn well bet that I'm going to reach out to him after 9 and say, can I get some help with this problem? We've already established that kind of relationship.
Yep.
That puts him on the hook a little bit to be there for me because he's shown that he's modeling the behavior, right? So it's just extraordinarily powerful, that speed to lead. But you asked about martech systems. So building a robust system is one of the best ways to multiply the impact of your marketing efforts. There's obviously a few base level technologies that I consider essential in this stack, and getting them to work together is that force multiplier that I like to talk about. Helps you scale and optimize your marketing beyond what just a human team can do absent technologies. Before I talk about this, though, I want to, for some members of your audience, we talk about a martech stack. That sounds like you're trying to build a factory, right? And it's all of the complexity and expense and other things. I make it sound more complicated than it really is. The fact of the matter is a martech stack is nothing more than a couple of basic tools like a CRM and a data management system working in concert with one another, and it doesn't have to be expensive. And as a matter of fact, if you have a CRM right now that you're using, but you don't have necessarily the other components of a full marketing stack, you may find that your existing components, like a HubSpot, for example, work extraordinarily well with low-cost supplements to that system that can be plugged in very easily. You start with your CRM. Your CRM is at the heart of your martech stack, right? It's a central hub for all your data and customer information, tracks your sales. But a good CRM should also bring in some element of every interaction. So whether you're using a CDP, a customer data platform, or some kind of web analytic tools, bringing that in is important to create a 360-degree view of the customer. And I think that that's one of the elements that a lot of people miss and frankly don't understand. How am I going to tell if somebody in my CRM visited my website? Shamir, because you do this every day, there are ways to track that. There are ways that you can do that, and it will not break the bank. And wouldn't it be great when you look up Mr. Jones in your CRM to see that Mr. Jones was on your website today? Or even better, making sure that you have automation tied to that CRM through an automation platform. So when Mr. Jones visits your website and you already have permission to contact Mr. Jones and you already have his email address, you can send out a note to them indicating that you want to help them. So that is critically important. Now, all of these systems work together. All of these systems are sending out automated campaigns. All of these systems are ensuring that you're in front of your customers. How do you know you're successful? And that's where the last main component of a good martech stack comes in, which is analytics and BI tools, business intelligence tools. You cannot get away without looking at your performance across all channels with the raw numbers and the numbers that are compiled into insights. Google Analytics is a great low-cost way to do this. There's other BI tools out there. Microsoft has one whose name is escaping me right now. Power Builder, Power Tools, Power BI. And the one that I like the most, which is Tableau, to bring this information in. You know, my boss has a saying, which is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so a martech stack, if built correctly, has to have some component of measurement so you can manage the overall experience.
A lot of times marketers are intimidated because they just don't know where to start.
Right.
It's hard for them to know where to start. And you really said it right from the very beginning. Start with the customer, right? Start with their journey. So if someone said, hey, look, we're looking to start a solar company, what kind of experience do we want? Well, first of all, we need to, advertise in the marketplace so that people know, people who are looking to maybe save, lower their energy bills, lower their electricity cost and so forth. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to show how solar delivers on that when we drive them to the website. Then we'll say, do you want us to contact you? You have them fill out a form, set an appointment, whatever the case is. Well, okay, that person who filled out the form, they're ready for more information. We want to quickly be able to be responsive to them. We want to quickly be able to evaluate their needs and then deliver a cost to them. So now you've just mapped out that experience. So now it's what technology do we need to support that, right? What are the components that we need to support that? Well, we need to be able to manage the advertising, right? We need a website with a content management system so that we can have the right content. Maybe we need some level of personalization there so that we can, depending how the person came to us, we're giving them the right information, right? We need a contact form. We go to a CRM. We need the CRM to connect to some marketing automation platform, right? To push out that notification to the local sales agent based on the zip code. So now you're transitioning that customer journey into technical specifications that become what we need from a martech standpoint, right? So we're really kind of walking marketers through how they begin to get to that point. And it doesn't need to be complicated at first. It'll get complicated by itself, right? Because you'll have opportunities to say, oh, there's a chance to do something here, and we can add this touch point here, and we can tweak this because you have the data to be able to support that. But just understanding this is what the customer wants to do is right there, the beginning of translating that into the specs, into the martech stack that you can now establish, get the baseline with those fundamental systems you mentioned, the CRM, the CMS, the CDP, possibly, right, the analytics, and then begin to kind of build and layer on top of that. And that foundation is going to be effective.
That's right. And what you would build on top of that perhaps would be something like we talked about earlier, which would be an AI component that would tie all of these things together. But you first need to make sure that you are consolidating that picture of your customer. And you said something very, very pertinent or just a moment ago, which is, keeping in mind what the customer wants to do. The other thing that a martech stack needs to be able to do is to be able to understand what the customer does not want to do. So marketing is, and a lot of people miss this, unfortunately, a highly regulated industry. There are regulations that are specific to different industry verticals. There's FCC rules, there's FTC rules, there's CAN-SPAM Act. There's all sorts of things that you have to keep in mind. So if you're not giving your customers the appropriate preferences and the ability to opt out and recording that and making sure that you're actually putting those requests into action, you can actually not just lose a customer, not just lose your reputation, not just lose your market share. You can actually lose some money, and in some cases, a not insignificant amount of money if you don't do things the right way. And a martech stack allows you to keep track of those preferences, to honor opt-outs, to make sure that you're not doing something the customer doesn't want, which will keep you out of both reputational and business trouble.
And I'm gonna edit just one thing you said. A martech stack should allow you to do that.
That's right.
And I say that because one of my pet peeves is I go in maybe to an email I've gotten. I hit unsubscribe because I don't want to get it anymore. And it tells me, okay, you'll be removed from our list in 7 to 10 days. What what year are we in? Why does it take several days to remove me from your list? I can't even comprehend that. It's an instantaneous act. I don't even understand that. So you've got two problems, right? So one, you've got marketers who don't have the right martech stack, and then you've got the other problem of marketers who have a market stack, but it's so poorly configured that they can't do the things they need to do. They can't take the actions they need to take. They can't deliver the kind of experience that people expect them to be able to deliver, and it ultimately adds value. And I'm sure you've seen this story played out time and again throughout your career.
Oh, I have. I mean, I work with businesses now, not with Amerilife, but just people that I know who have a shared Google sheet with people's PII on it that's used as their opt-out list, and it makes my skin crawl and makes me immediately warn them that they should consider doing it differently. That's not an appropriate way to do it. And it's interesting. We talk about opt-out lists. One idea I had recently was looking at opt-out lists. And if you have full attribution through the marketing funnel, through all of the elements that we've been talking about earlier, let's look at the purchase history of our opt-outs. Let's look at where that lead came from. I don't necessarily want to characterize it as a bad lead, but let's call it a lead that did not provide the return on the advertising spend that we would have liked. Maybe there's some adjustment that can be made at the top of the funnel in terms of where we're allocating our marketing dollars to get less of those kind of leads and more of the kind of leads that, may have come from the periphery of our target focus, but actually turned into the kind of customers that we want to that want to continue to engage with us. That's a really steep challenge, doing all from the very bottom of the experience back to the top of the experience. Great use case for AI. Take this lead set, explore where they came from, and recommend a targeting strategy that would get me fewer of those and more of these.
We've talked about so much. So much, as we know, has changed in the world of marketing. So many more capabilities exist. It's only been the last, maybe 10 years where we've been talking about MarTech stats. Less than half of that since we've been talking about AI. Things have changed so fast. There are many companies out there who have kept pace with that change. There are many companies out there who have done a craptastic job of keeping pace, and some of those companies barely exist, if they exist at all. So I'm going to take you back in time. We're going to do Back to the Future here, right? We're going to go back to 1985. You're a consultant. You're hired by Sears to say, hey, Bill, where are things going in the next 30 years? Like, what do we need to do with Sears? And we know where Sears is today, which is nowhere. What are you telling them in terms of, hey, this is what we need to begin to think about in terms of the customer experience if you want to continue to evolve the way that the market's going to evolve? What would you tell them if you go back in time?
I would say this to them: be very intentional with data. Don't just hoard information, use it. Use the information you have to segment your audience, to personalize your outreach, to test what messages are working, and to cut out the stuff that isn't. I mean, modern marketing will allow for the extreme fine-tuning of targeting and measurement in the future. So we want to make sure that we're collecting the data, but that we're also utilizing it in the ways we can right now. It's the difference between a Yellow Pages world and an SEO and Google Ads world right now. So that's the key statement. Collect data, but be very intentional with your utilization of it. And something like that perhaps could have even saved a store like Sears. If Sears would have seen that their customers are moving away from brick and mortar, and they wouldn't have just anchored themselves to that model, and they would have put all their effort into going where their customers were going, we might be going to Sears.com rather than Amazon.com right now. I guess we'll never know.
Nope.
But yeah, the fact of the matter is that one of the most frustrating things that I've seen in my last 30 years in this business. I'll say something a little off color here, and we can edit it out if we want later, but I'll say it anyway. When I, starting in about 1999, going through the year 2000 fiasco in the early 2000s, every business, including businesses like Sears, were talking about big data. And it used to really annoy me because most of these businesses talking about big data were like teenagers talking about fornicating. Everyone was talking about it, but only about 3% of them were doing it. And those 3% that were actually doing something were doing it really, really badly. So the fact of the matter is that big data became this kind of thing for people to gravitate around, but nobody was gravitating around it in an intentional way. What are we going to do with this data? Except for just a very, very few outliers. And we know those outliers by name. We know Google, we know Amazon, we know Microsoft, we know Facebook. These companies that had that intentionality with the data that they were collecting, rather than just showing off the side of their database as something to be proud of as a customer asset or as a corporate asset. A lot of those are not around anymore, but those that did embrace the data and had intentionality with it, they're powerhouses now.
I love it. Wonderful advice. Bill, thank you so much for your time today. It was a great conversation. We hope to have you back on the pod soon. It was great talking to you. So many more things that we can explore and go on about. So we really appreciate your time today and really appreciate your experience and expertise in all you're doing in the market.
Thank you very much.